And let's start talking about cryptocurrency, the blockchain. And right now, central banks like the IMF, the Biz, even the corporate media, they've been pounding on Bitcoin, the blockchain system, cryptocurrencies, and even the banks, they've banned people from using credit cards, debit cards to purchase different cryptocurrencies. Why do you think they're taking such a hard stance on cryptocurrencies?
I think we're at such early days that I think regulators, policymakers, government officials, and elected officials are all really trying to get their head around what should the regulatory framework be for how digital currencies, cryptocurrencies are going to operate in our society. Initially, alongside traditional fiat currencies, and longer term, obviously, potentially replacing, at least partially, if not entirely, traditional fiat currencies. So I think there's going to be this, in my opinion, transition where we have a lot of new things happening quickly, and governments, regulators are trying to catch up. And I think their starting position of being, quite to your point, quite negative on it, I think is just a reaction to the volatility, meaning, just the wide swings in prices that we've seen. If you look at the last year in Bitcoin, for example, I mean, just some huge swings in the value. And that's, of course, got regulators quite nervous about people actually committing significant parts of their savings and net worth to something that has that kind of volatility. And I think further, it's outside of their control today. So if you're a regulator or elected official or Federal Reserve official, whoever you are, you're sort of saying, whoa, this is something that I don't have my arms around. So I need to set a tone out there that's quite negative. So I think that's where it's coming from. I think that once this regulatory roadmap gets developed and everyone understands the rules of engagement and how cryptocurrencies will be used, traded, valued, exchanged, I think there'll be a lot more stability in price, and I think there'll be a lot broader adoption.
Now, you said something very interesting about the banks being worried where cryptocurrency might replace the fiat currency. I mean, do you see that happening in the future?
I see it long term. I think that, the believers in cryptocurrencies that are saying that, fiat currency's gone and governments are gone and all this kind of stuff, I don't buy into any of that. But I do think there is a strong rationale for very long term and I say very long term, I mean 20 years plus out from today. I think that there's a really strong rationale to look at the advantages that cryptocurrency offers in terms of traceability and control, and the reality that the economy is becoming increasingly global, and globalization and trade just globally will be much more efficient with a common platform in terms of currencies, as opposed to everything that goes on today with respect to the differences in purchasing power as a result of different valuations in currencies. So it's an opportunity to create global standards that I think broadly can be used to increase global commerce and thereby increase global welfare.
Now, many people who are just learning about the blockchain, learning about cryptocurrencies, they're very nervous, almost like when the internet was first started. People were very nervous, to put their credit cards on there. People said it was unsafe, and, everyone didn't do anything really with the internet. And now look at us today with, iPhones and everything else. People are very worried about government control, about governments actually controlling the blockchain or the central banks controlling the blockchain. Can these entities actually control the blockchain?
I think that it's a very interesting question. I don't know how, in the current construct, it could be controlled. It's just by definition decentralized, consensus driven, and therefore very difficult to have a single point of concentration of control. I mean, just by definition, it's designed to not have that. So you'd have to think about mechanisms whereby governments would be members of a blockchain, participants in, and have permissions that would give them visibility and therefore controls over activity. I mean, that's to me, the most logical way this unfolds. Again, not because I am just generally not in the camp that says that it's going to completely displace governments, and I'm also not in the camp that says cryptocurrencies are going to fail. I know there's a lot of very big name investors out there that say it's going to fail completely. I would say I'm much more, in the middle of the fairway. I believe it's going to be a credible alternative to fiat. It already is, in some instances, a credible alternative, and I think there'll be a long-term transition where a new paradigm is going to be created from a regulatory perspective that's going to facilitate trading, buying, selling, exchanging in crypto versus for goods and merchandise.
So from your viewpoint, how important is blockchain? Do we really need it today?
Today, as we operate today, blockchain is in its infancy. It's nascent. It's the start. You referenced the early days of the internet, and I would say, we're even earlier days in blockchain. We're still back in the days of figuring out, is it going to be, we're figuring out, is it going to be HTTP is the protocol, for web traffic. We all are familiar with that HTTP : backslash. That, it wasn't clear that was going to be the protocol back in the early 90s for internet, before the web even started. That's where we are with blockchain right now, where, there's a debate between Ethereum. Go down the list of all of the different protocols that are out there, and Ethereum's got the lead today, but who knows what could replace it in short order. Some of my older friends and colleagues, I remind them of the 1980s when there was a VHS versus beta, debate in VCRs and the old video recorders. For the long time, it looked like beta was going to be the leading protocol. In the end, it ended up being VHS. So I just think we're at those early days. And so the answer is no. Blockchain, is not needed. Obviously, the global economy is running very well without it today. But there's these opportunities to bring great efficiencies, greater transparency, traceability, and as a result, accountability to global commerce. And that's the promise of blockchain, creating the internet of value as people are starting to think of it. And I certainly think of it that way. It's a whole new way of doing business.
So in what industries do you see the blockchain being profitable? Let me just back up for a sec here. Do you see certain industries being profitable now? And also, do you see certain industries being profitable later on?
Yeah, I think I would think of it in terms of disruption in the short term. So which industries are going to be disrupted the most in the short term, medium term by blockchain? And I would point to financial services as being the one that most industry observers, and I would concur with it, is going to be the industry that's most ripe for disruption, because, of course, we're talking about a new form of currency, and therefore a new form of exchanging value, and disintermediating or cutting out the middlemen that are the banks today. That's part of the promise of blockchain. So you could envision, one of the blockchains that we're building is tying a whole bunch of retail merchants together and allowing them to share inventory so that any one of them has the appearance of having and the reality of having the benefit of the inventory of all the others. And it can all be done on a blockchain where none of these retailers have to know each other or have a trust relationship or any form of real relationship between them, because the blockchain governs the whole process of trading inventory between them, and the associated token and ecosystem we're building around the coin we're building enables them to share inventory seamlessly. And frictionlessly, and there's no bank involved in that. So it's a very interesting blockchain we're building, where we think we can help the merchants around the world, small to medium-sized merchants especially, who are trying to compete with big box retailers that have a lot more inventory. We enable a small to medium-sized merchant suddenly to have access to inventory globally from all some of them may be competitors, some of them may be not competitors, but none of those relationships have to exist. The merchant simply has to become a participant, a member of this blockchain we're building, this financial services blockchain we're building, and they get the benefit of all of that inventory. And so, they can now compete with the big box retailers and compete with online. and show up like they've got more inventory than a lot of big box retailers. So we think it's a great way to drive new revenue for the small and medium-sized merchants. We also think it's a great way to build loyalty, because now consumers will start to say, hey, it's that independent, it's Dave's independent furniture store across the street where I can get the most inventory. I don't want to go to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. So it's a really interesting time in that's an example of the promise of blockchain. But as I said a few minutes ago, it's really early days, and there's still a lot of bugs in the technology. We've seen blockchains, brought to their knees by, CryptoKitties, for example, brought the Ethereum blockchain to its knees in terms of performance, because it cannot support the transaction pace of and volume of transactions. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And as I say, when people ask me where are we, I say we're in the early 90s. It's before even the start of the World Wide Web. If
we look at this from a big picture type of scenario, Dubai, they want at least 50% of their transactions all done by the blockchain by 2020. That's, 2 years away? Do you think the rest of the world is going to move to this also?
Yeah, look, I think that when you think about a city, one of our partners at Global Life Technology is a company called Civic Connect. They're a Los Angeles-based smart cities supplier, and they supply already cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle with smart city solutions. And Dubai is clearly emerged as a world leader in adopting new technologies, starting with smart city technologies, and now they're talking about blockchain and related infrastructure and blockchain, bringing property title insurance, car insurance, bringing all those types of things onto a blockchain. You can envision a city really running a lot more efficiently if something like property title is now memorialized on a blockchain. You can eliminate things like title insurance, and property title insurance is something that's a very big expense for people across this country. It is a very big expense for people, and there's a promise that blockchain can eliminate it because of the immutable ledger that the blockchain offers to trace the history of a property and its associated ownership. So I think that's a great example. Dubai that you raised is a great example of a city taking a leadership position, but I just do not believe that 50% target. I just don't think that it can happen that quickly. I think it's like a 5-year objective is much more realistic, because I don't think we're in a position where the blockchain protocols are sufficiently evolved that you can reliably transact at scale. There's no question that there's use cases that are proven. Dubai has actually already announced some use cases, and there's a recent use case with Walmart and IBM, and they announced a supply chain use case, which you may have heard of, that sort of demonstrated the ability of the blockchain to trace bad or contaminated produce over the span of a few seconds instead of 2 weeks that it would normally take Walmart to get bad produce off the shelves. So that type of example and use case is clearly a huge cost savings in that example for Walmart. In Dubai, clearly a huge potential reduction in the municipal overhead if all of those paper-based contracts that the city has some jurisdiction over are all moved to smart contracts. Wow, can it become a lot more efficient, and everyone can start avoiding those long lines at public service kiosks.
So do you think in the future, people will no longer need the banking system? Because if you can receive money into an exchange wallet or an offline wallet, and you can spend your currency, and use it in, any type of online type of purchase, what would be the purpose of the banking system at that point?
I'm a believer that governments have a long-term role to play in society, and so I think there does some form of centralized authority is what's contributed to the global order and prosperity that we enjoy in countries like ours and around the developed world. So I think that banks have a role to play. And when you say banking system, I think there's no question going to be a significant evolution of the banking system as it is set up today. And I alluded to it earlier, but I think there'll be a transition as people start to adopt cryptocurrency. As soon as there's a regulatory framework that everybody can buy into, you'll start to see adoption ramp quickly. And I think this is a 24, 36 month horizon. And once that happens, you're going to start to see very disruptive players come into financial services. A lot of them are startups today that we're going to see emerge. And those companies are going to have a meaningful impact on the way banks operate today. And that said, I don't think that the likes of JP Morgan Chase or Citigroup or Wells Fargo are just going to sit still. They're going to themselves commercialize blockchain technology to introduce efficiencies in their own business and offer their customers a much more efficient way of dealing with them, but still have a trust relationship as people start to migrate to trusting the blockchain. The brand of JP Morgan Chase, as an example, is such a powerful brand. If you're a consumer and they show up and say, look, this is a way for you to lower your banking fees, lower your transaction costs if we'll move your business onto a blockchain, the consumer is going to buy into that a lot more rapidly than some startup approaching them with the same proposition. So I just think that there will be a role for banks to play. I think the brand equity and the track record of the big banks is hard to displace, in the medium term. Very long term, I think, to your point right on, the banking system was going to look totally different. And I think we're going to see a much more decentralized architecture that is the promise of blockchain. And the need for a huge a huge bank to be the leader is going to be challenged. So I think those biggest banks have a challenge on the horizon.
Now, Global Live is dealing in artificial intelligence. How does that fit into the blockchain? What are you guys looking to do with that?
Interestingly, we think there's a convergence of artificial intelligence and blockchain happening, and that's what Global Live Technology is going to market to capitalize on. And the convergence that we see is anytime you talk about an artificial intelligence platform or algorithms, machine learning algorithms as they're commonly called these days, that are sort of a subset of the future of artificial intelligence, but it's what's being commercialized today is machine learning. Artificial intelligence algorithms require really good, high-quality, complete data sets as their input. So there's a classic problem in software that applies in artificial intelligence as well, that if you enter bad data or partial data or fragmented data or incorrect data, you're going to get a bad outcome from that AI. You're not going to get the outcome that helps you reduce costs or increase revenues in your business. You're going to get some output that doesn't make any sense. So we believe the convergence of AI and blockchain is that blockchain has the promise of providing a high quality, complete data set that's decentralized management and consensus management can validate and affirm the quality of that data set. And it's immutable, so we can rely on it being immutable and traceable. And so that data coming from a blockchain as the input to an AI is going to lead to much better performance of AI across any industry. So it applies in healthcare and financial services and agriculture and supply chain, manufacturing. It applies everywhere. When you think about where artificial intelligence breaks down today is the quality of the data set. So we believe the blockchain is a solution to that, and we're building technology stacks that capitalize on that convergence.
Now, specifically, you mentioned a couple of different benefits. What are the financial benefits for the economy?
Broadly, macro picture, of course, there's efficiency. So, anytime we can move something away from a paper-based, and I'm talking now short to medium term, what are the benefits we're going to see? It's cost savings, much more than it's new revenue, in my opinion. We're going to see the next 12, 24, 36 months, next 1, 2, 3 years is going to be all about cost savings. And one very clear example is most of our contracts today, whether it's insurance, even our bank accounts, our home, our property title and insurance, all these things, our driver's license, our healthcare information. I mean, all this stuff still has largely paper-based components and largely paper-based interaction, and so in the next 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to see the blockchain create an opportunity to move all of that stuff to smart contracts and move all of your personal data onto a blockchain that's secure, and then you grant permissions where permissions are appropriate. So you take all your health records, for example, all of them I envision being on blockchains, and instead of your entire medical file going to every healthcare practitioner you encounter, you get permissions-based access. So healthcare practitioners get the information they need to do their job and nothing more, and health payers and insurers get the information they need and nothing more, and so on and so forth. So you can envision how much our lives would be simplified if suddenly all of those slow paper-based documents that are riddled with errors that people lose and have to replace and all kinds of stuff like that, all of that goes away and all of it becomes in a secure place that is a private blockchain. Right. Yeah, I would say in the longer term, so there's like lots of examples like that about cost savings, and supply chain is another one that we believe in and that industry is grabbing onto is, how can we simplify a supply chain? So when you think about a retailer, for example, that has, thousands or tens of thousands of suppliers giving them different products, they have to have a trust relationship with every single one of those suppliers. They have to offer credit, and the suppliers have to offer them credit for every single one of those products. And there's just an enormous amount of accounting and paperwork associated with those supplier relationships. So you can envision blockchains that just massively simplify that overhead. And then when you think about tracing where a bad product came from, the blockchain has an immediately available audit trail that can really simplify reverse logistics when that retailer has to return things to suppliers. So and then those suppliers have to go back to their original manufacturers or suppliers, their own suppliers, and trace back bad product. So you can really see tremendous simplifications there. But there's many more examples like that. But longer term is where I see tremendous revenue opportunities as well. There are lots of opportunities that are sort of nascent stage today. But when you think about using AI, and I'll go back to the financial services context as one example. When you think about walking into a retailer today and you buy as a consumer, and you buy a new television, for example, and they offer you financing for that television because you say you like financing, so you want to pay $100 a month or whatever for it, and a loan is issued to you for that. The retailer finances that for you. But if an AI is operating that loan adjudication platform, which is one of the products that we're building for fintechs, you can envision now the retailer and the representative, the retail rep, dealing with the consumer, saying, look, you can actually afford to buy that sound system at the same time, and it's going to cost you an extra $20 a month, but you qualify for that loan, and the AI can make that prediction that consumer can support that additional credit and make those recommendations, or cross-sell the consumer to a totally different product based on that consumer's profile and predict what other products in that store the customer may want. So that kind of thing is going to drive more revenue, upsell, cross-sell revenue, and that's just in a retail example, but you can envision that across the entire economy.
What about the people who are thinking about this? And you mentioned the healthcare service where your records would go on there. What about the people that are worried about hacking? I mean, today we see, certain hospitals have been hacked and your information is put out there. What about on the blockchain?
To this point, as blockchain and the cryptography that is the encryption platform the blockchain operates on has proven very robust. There are some schools of thought that say that the emerging quantum computers will be able to challenge the blockchain and potentially break the blockchain cryptography. But for now, with all the technologies that are there now, it appears to be the most advanced secure cryptography out there because it's so distributed. It's very, very difficult to break a system that has all these nodes that all have the same information. And so when there is a hack, it's very, quite immediately evident that there has been one, because all the other nodes obviously don't agree with the one node that now has a change to it. This consensus model, decentralized decision-making, consensus-driven decision-making, decentralized data storage and management really makes it a very interesting architecture from a security perspective. So I think right back to the top of this conversation where you were talking about people having concerns about putting their credit card on an online banking site. I mean, those are legitimate concerns. And frankly, actually, in the last couple of years is when we've seen just a myriad of hacks where people's credit card data have been stolen. And guess what? Every single one of those hacks has been into a centralized traditional database architecture system. There's one point of failure. Even though the database itself might be redundant and spread out all over the place, it's one entry point, and we see what can happen. So we think that that's a great, problem that blockchain has the promise of solving. But we can now, as consumers, be confident that our data is secure in a blockchain architecture, which is proven so far to be very, very to be impossible to hack.
So what are any specific projects that your company is working on? What's new coming up?
Our go-to-market strategy is joint venture. So we're looking for joint venture partners where we can partner 50-50 with an existing software company that has an existing customer base and that has an opportunity to migrate their existing business onto a blockchain. So take any consumer software as a service business, for example. And we want to partner with them to say, hey, your traditional centralized software as a service or centralized SaaS-based model, we're going to co-develop a blockchain technology and commercialize that with you to your customer base that's going to introduce cost savings and new revenue opportunities. So that's our entire go-to-market strategy. And we're doing it in manufacturing with a company called iGen Innovations that supplies AI today to leading auto manufacturers. And we're building a blockchain with them to, again, to my earlier comment about how do we get great data into AI so AIs work better. Well, we're going to build a blockchain in that manufacturing environment that will make the quality of the data going into the AIs much better and much more reliable and traceable. In the healthcare context, we've got a partner called Acorn, where we're commercializing a product that will enable the entire human genome to be placed on a blockchain. So you as a consumer can have your entire genome mapped and stored on a private blockchain for future use when the healthcare system has advanced sufficiently that gene therapy and related anti-aging and preventative medicine treatments become commonplace. Your genome will be fully mapped, and obviously those types of treatments are becoming available even already today, and are going to roll out in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years very much, very, very quickly. In the financial services industry, I described that blockchain that we're building for merchants, and there's obviously another great one in financial services that we're building, where we're saying to fintechs, we're building software for fintechs around the world to have a better source of funding for their loans that they offer their customers. And right now, all the fintech companies, the financial technology companies, they all have to go to big banks to get funding for the services they offer their customers. Well, what if we democratize that on a blockchain? And what if we enable every citizen to become both a lender and a borrower? And we disintermediate the banks in that way. So we're very excited about that one as well. But so you can see, like, we've got lots of stuff going on, but it's always with a joint venture partner. So in that financial services joint venture is Flexity Financial is the name of our joint venture partner. All of these partners are established high growth companies that are software companies today that have significant customer bases today. And we're partnered with them in a true 50-50. So we're completely aligned, and our incentives are identical to get a decentralized blockchain-based architecture that's AI-enabled, get it out into their customer base as fast as possible. Because I think this whole game is a speed-to-market game. It's a speed-to-market game, and we want to be first to market.
So how different is blockchain going to look 5 to 10 years from now?
I think it's going to be transformational. I think that you think about the infrastructure that operates our economy today is the database infrastructure that's centralized, and it has its strengths, but it also has its weaknesses. And you can envision a future, I'd envision a future 10, 15, 20 years out where all the benefits of a decentralized decision making and decentralized architecture are in place. And whether we're talking about financial services or transportation and logistics or supply chain or manufacturing, it doesn't matter. There's real benefits to having